This is the Roller Coaster Podcast. We are here to help you be empowered and renew your sense of purpose as a midlife mom. This is your time to redefine and reclaim your power as a woman. Just because our kids are getting older doesn't mean that our lives still don't have crazy twists, turns, ups and downs. And that's not to mention what our hormones are doing. We're navigating helping our kids plan their next chapters while quietly wondering, what the heck does my next chapter look like? My name is Lucy Q, wife, mom, podcaster, and journaling mentor. This is a crazy time in your life, but you are not alone. So I'm inviting you to throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby.
This is the Roller Coaster, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Midlife is definitely a season of change. Our once exciting careers can become stagnant, retirement options come closer, and empty nests give us more freedom. The question that often gets asked is, what's next? And it creates a hunger inside of us. We know that we want something different, but it's the what that hangs us up. How do you go from here to there if you have no idea where there is? Joining me today is Lauren St. George, the founder of What's Next, to share how you can get unstuck and start your next chapter. Welcome, Lauren.
Thank you. How are you today?
I'm fantastic. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about because being stuck is what got me to where I am today. And I understand the pain of being stuck and the hopelessness that you can feel at the time. But I'm also starting to see that being stuck is almost an epidemic for midlife women. Why do you think that this is happening?
That's a really great question. My personal feeling on it is that once we hit midlife, we've taken on a lot of other people's stuff. We've had to. We have families, we have careers, we have partners, and we start to warp and morph ourselves, and we take on things that they can be very positive. It could be a joint belief with your partner. It can be a mission and a way that you want to drive the family, but we often miss out or leave behind some of the things that are really important to us. And when we do that, we forget who we are, and I think we get stuck because kids start to go off to school, or they've left the house, and you're left with yourself, and then it's like, well, what's important to me now? And I think we get stuck at that point. Well, sometimes for some people, I think it's like I've done the family, got the house, got the dogs, got the job. What now? Because I've hit that rut, hit that pattern, and I really want something new, something different. But the thing is how to break out of that, right? Because you get stuck,
And that's
stuck. Mm-hmm.
And that's it, exactly, because I started asking those questions, all those boxes, house, car, kids, vacations, dog, all of those boxes were checked. But I was starting to realize that along the way, I forgot about me. And that's, I think, why I got so far down. And, I hit pretty low. That's my story. But are some of the ways, like, what are some of the other ways that somebody could hear and say, oh, okay, I'm stuck. That's what's wrong. Like, how does it manifest in different ways?
I think it comes for some people. It's a case of not necessarily finding joy anymore in life. They're not finding the things that bring them joy. They're not in that state of flow. And it doesn't have to come from career. It could be anything within your life. But are you feeling engaged? Are you intellectually stimulated? Are you finding that you're being challenged? We often fall into that comfort zone. And that's where our brains want us to be. We're designed to seek comfort, to not have things around us that are threatening, and so our brain tries to keep us in these patterns, these comfort patterns, and breaking out of that becomes really hard because it then perceives things as threatening. And when we perceive things as threatening, we go into fight or flight, and we either run away from it or we try and knock it down. It's that little voice in your head when something new presents itself and you're like, can't do that. That doesn't feel good. Or that's a bad idea. Not going to look at it. And oftentimes those are the things we do need to be looking at. So, I think being aware of oftentimes that side of us that's pushing away from things, because we seek this this happy, comfortable place, but that's where you get stuck, right? It's the comfort zone, and that's not growth. That's not challenge. So I think that's another area where you could feel stuck.
And I think, going back to being in that comfort zone, I always related it to, I heard a whisper and I ignored it. And then it got louder. And eventually, that's when everything came crashing down, because you can only push those feelings aside for so long. It's easier in the moment to maybe deal with them, but somewhere along the line, it's going to come up. And in my case, it came up in the worst possible way. So that's what we want to help people prevent. We don't want to see anyone sort of get to that point. So what are some of those first steps that somebody
Mhm.
can take when they start to realize, okay, yeah, I'm stuck. I need to pull myself up and make those changes. What's that first step?
I think the first step is reacquainting yourself with yourself. It's getting to know you again. I earlier talked about taking on things from our life and what surrounds us, and so we got to remind ourselves of really what's important to us. So I like to start with values. And put together a list of what I believe my current values are. I think this is something you should do, every couple of years anyway, and look at what your top five. You don't want an exhaustive list of every value you have, but what are your top five values? You can go online. It's easy to Google for a list of values to get you started. Certainly there is not one list out there that's more right than another, but it'll get you going. Write down what your five top values are and then look at them one by one. Is that value yours? Is it something that you've brought along with you? Oftentimes I work with people who, we look through those values, and they may come from childhood. It could be your parents' value that you grew up and you embodied. It could come from, again, your career, your job, your spouse, your family. And then look at it. It could be something that's really good. And you might be like, I like that. And I'm keeping it. And then there's ones that you're like, that's not serving me anymore. Or that's not my value. That's someone else's value. Swap it out. It's a way of hacking things, because ultimately your values are the beliefs that govern your life. And those values are going to be the things that really they reinforce or they influence the decisions that you make in your life. So I start there. I think that's like foundational. And then on top of that, I then look at, what are my strengths? Remind yourself of all the good stuff that you have. What are the and don't wimp out. Like, write the longest list you can of everything you can think of. Because oftentimes being stuck is also around confidence. So, what are all your strengths? What are your skills? What are the things you don't like doing or not interested in? Some people call those weaknesses, but I think by the time you're in your midlife, it's just, look, these are the things I want to avoid. I'm not interested in this. What are your interests? What give you joy? And if you can't think of that list of things, start noting it down in your life. Keep a journal with you, keep a piece of paper, your phone. And as you go through the next week, anytime you find yourself smiling or you find joy or you're in that state of flow, note it down, because you're reminding yourself of the things that are really important to you. So those two things, like that list of strengths and skills and interests, I think is really important to remind you again of what makes you tick. And then your values, because they're fundamental to the way that you live your life and make decisions, are the places I'd start.
Could you maybe share some suggestions of, what potentially somebody could have as a value?
For some people it can be connection, but there's always the flip side to it, right? There's individuality, stability for some people, which makes change harder if people don't like taking risk, if stability is is a value, kindness, For some people, it's status, and that's okay. I mean, there's no judgment when it comes to your values. These are the things that drive you: honesty, transparency, authenticity. Those are some. There's lists out there that are 200 values long, but there'll be a place to start.
So once you sort of go through this self-awareness and you're building this, you take it back to the business terms, this, SWOT analysis
Mhm.
of who you are and where you're at right now. Where do you go from there?
So once you've done that, I think you've done kind of some of the work of reacquainting yourself with yourself. I think the next thing is really understanding where the fear comes from. And so I spoke briefly about how our brains work. We have this primitive brain that was our original brain. Over evolution. It has grown, and it's now called the triune brain because there's three pieces to it. But the primitive brain, the thing that kept us alive when we were being chased by woolly mammoths, is still in effect. We're just not being chased by those things anymore. But anything that's perceived as threatening, whether that's an idea or a new situation, those are the things that are going to make us, that little voice pop up going, no, that doesn't feel right. And so I think if you're aware of where fear comes from, you're aware that voice is in your head, you can counteract it. You can actually have a response to it, because I think at the end of the day, our brains are a tool. And when we understand how they work, we can use them to our benefit, or we can at least, prevent them from hurting us. And so if you know to look out for that voice, you can at least stop it, and you can go, no, this is something that's going to make me happy, or this is something that's of interest to me, or this is something I want to research, pursue. Um, it's having that response to the voice that shuts it down, and the more you do that, the easier it'll be for the good ideas and for those things to come through that you'll then entertain as possibilities. The other part of it is the fear of failure. I think that stops a lot of people. And failures we could do an entire podcast on failure because it's something I'm very interested in as well. Failure comes, I think, from our childhood and from the school system. I think that plays into it.
Agreed.
It's built.
It's what the minute you sort of said something before you said the school system, I'm like, oh, it's school.
It is. And what was interesting is many years ago when I was doing my degree, we talked about this, and it stuck with me that our education system was formed during the Industrial Revolution, and it's about manufacturing, right? So we put the children in, teach them the same thing, you grade them the same way, you do the same tests, and you spit them out at the end, and now they're supposed to go out into this world. But we're now in a world of exponential change. The things that the jobs that my children will have 10, 20 years from now don't exist. So how do we account for that? And so this kind of, we're taught that we have to get it right the first time is detrimental, because I think that stops people from even trying. So on that side of things, I think it's a mind shift of saying, I'm going to take on more of like a product development engineering mind. I'm going to explore things. I'm going to try things. I'm going to learn along the way. I'm going to, iterate on it. And I'm going to keep moving forward. And as long as I feel like I'm moving forward, I'm in the right direction, and I'm not going to get it right the first time. I mean, that's the thing about getting unstuck. It's about doing something. It's not that I'm going to necessarily get it right with the first thing that I do. But if you can do that mindset shift as well of really like looking at it as, this is fun, I'm going to keep trying, and I'll get there, and there might be different than where I thought I was going to be when I started. But if half the products on the marketplace right now, if they put that out on its first iteration, most things wouldn't work. People wouldn't buy them. It's because they've been in a lab, they've been testing it, they've tried things. I mean, the Dyson ads have said enough about our 500th version of this finally made it out. And so I think if we can have that compassion for ourselves, and we can be more playful in trying things out, that we'll be more successful as well. So I think having the understanding of the fear of change and the fear of failure will be the next step in helping you move forward.
Right.
I remember one of the darkest days of my life, the day I hit rock bottom. When I went searching for answers on how to get myself out of that dark place, I discovered journaling. But when I tried to put pen to paper, I didn't know where to start. I had no guide or method to help me express what I was feeling. The only thing that I had was the blank page of my journal staring back at me. It took me years to figure out the proper journaling method so that I could understand who I was, what I wanted, how I thought, and how I felt. That is why I've taken everything that I've learned and turned it into a guide that will not only help you start your journaling journey, but will also help you start each day with purpose and gratitude. This guide is filled with growth tools, personal resources, and guided journal entries that will help you understand who you are, what you want, what you're thinking, and what you're feeling. You can find your journaling journey, your guide to starting each day with purpose and gratitude, on Amazon, and check out the show notes for links. Order your journaling journey today and discover your true self. And the fear of failure is a big one. For me, I think that's a harder one to deal with than the fear of change, because the fear of failure is a bit more public. Other people can see, when you've tried something and it doesn't work. And certainly along the way, with the podcast and different things I've tried, I have done things that I thought that was going to be amazing and were complete flops. And what I'm doing is out there for anybody to come across at any point in time. So for me, what I may consider a failure is very public. But what I've also been able to learn over the last few years is that something may not have worked how we thought, but somewhere along the road later on, that's going to come back up. And what we learned in that situation, what we perceived as failure, is going to come back to serve us in a great way later on. And it's, hindsight's always 20/20, but it's just realizing that, at least I did it. And when it comes to sort of managing that own voice in your head about, well, people are going to laugh at me if I fail, people are going to mock me, that type of thing. What I try and tell myself is, at least I'm out there trying. If anybody dares mock me, then I welcome them to try something just as daring. And you'll often find that doing that, those people that you fear may mock you aren't doing anything at all. So, I think it was Brene Brown had a quote about, if you're not in my arena, then I'm not listening. I've got to find it. I can't remember what it was, but it sort of alludes to that. If you're not willing to dare, then I'm not going to listen to you.
Exactly. I love that. I absolutely. I think naysayers are often the ones that are sitting in the arena watching, but they're not prepared to be down on the floor, participating. So yes, I think part of how you counteract that is you have a support system. You have like-minded people around you who are trying, things out as well, who are rallying you on, who are in your camp, and that helps to drown out the rest. Because I mean, if there are people who are cutting you down, it's probably, I always like to think about what's actually going on in their life, right? If they're saying those things, what's really happening in their heads. That's probably coming from a place of lack and lack of self-confidence and lack of motivation. They're probably jealous of what you're doing. Like you said, if you're learning something that down the road you can come back to and build upon, then that's success. Because again, you're not going to get it right the first time. But I would imagine that you're going to find more people in your life who are trying to support and lift you up than trying to cut you down. And you can certainly have a hand in that, with making sure that your support system and the people that you tell that you're doing certain things are going to be the ones that rally around you. Because you need to have someone in your corner, and none of this has to be done alone, right? Nothing gets built just by itself. So that support system, I think, is really important.
And I think, when you are willing to take those bold steps and create change for yourself. I think that's when you're going to see if your inner circle, those people closest to you, are actually your cheerleaders or not. Certainly for me, I found out that, a very, very close family member completely tore me down for everything that I was doing. And it was extremely painful to deal with. But it was an incredible opportunity for me to overcome and learn from and find my own way to make peace with both the situation and to find ways to rebuild that relationship. It's never easy, but there's always something good that comes out of it. But having said that, when it comes to that sort of inner circle that you have, sometimes there are people that you're just going to have to cut loose.
Absolutely. And I think you need to be careful about who you tell in the
Yes.
first place. Think about the people that do immediately surround you, and should they have the privilege of knowing what you're up to or not? I believe it was Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, who said, she was very careful about who she told, because if she told the wrong person, they were going to cut down that idea, and that idea wouldn't have gotten into the marketplace. And now she's I think she was the youngest self-made billionaire. So it is very important, and you're right. And you either have to cut them loose, and in some cases you can't cut them loose, right? It could be your mother or your father, and you don't want to cut them loose, but you can definitely stop talking about it, or you don't tell them in the first place. Because it's a fragile thing when it first starts, and when you're first putting it out there, and I think you have to protect it.
I loved the word you used, privilege. And I think that's key is, who's worthy of knowing, who are my true inner circle, my true cheerleaders, the ones that are going to stand by me no matter what. That word, using that word privileged is, I think, is so powerful. And it really creates that shift in how you're going to, potentially approach the topic with people, for sure. For sure.
And that's a two-way street as well. I think we have to be very aware of, the people in our life who are sharing things, and how we support them. Because if we're their champions, we're building that relationship where hopefully they'll be our champions back. And it's not that you need a lot of people, right? I think you need a few people. Like who's that person that you can call at 3 a.m. and they're going to answer. That it doesn't have to be a long list, but you need a few. And then they'll guard your idea, or your whatever you're trying. They'll be, they'll protect it with you.
And I've been very fortunate because my 3 greatest cheerleaders is my husband and our 2 sons. Because, my sons are sort of at that phase now where they're finishing college and they're trying to start their lives and they're trying to, build their future. So there's a lot of similarities between, what we're going through, and we share those stories, and we've been able to be each other's champions. And in fact, now both of our sons in one way or another are helping me in building my business. So, I've been very lucky, but I was really scared at the beginning to start to really share with them what I wanted to do, because it is so different. And, for me, this question that always came up in my head was, who are you to do this? And I've had to learn to say back, well, who am I to not do this?
Exactly. Who are you to not do this? And if you don't put yourself out there, what are you taking away from the world, right? If you have a skill, or you have something that you can share that maybe others aren't sharing, or they're not sharing it in the same way, then you're actually, you're devoiding the world of something really good if you don't put it out there.
And that's it, is, at least try, put it out there, see what happens. And then you're never going to be asking yourself a few years later, oh, I wonder what would have happened if I tried that. Well, try it. And if it doesn't work, well, now you know.
Exactly.
It's like, that's just another, box you've ticked. Okay, been there, tried that, ain't going to work. Let's go.
On to the next thing. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Is it sometimes, somewhere along the line, there was a saying about, And when it came to cold calling, you have to get, 9 no's to get 1 yes. And I
Mhm.
think the same comes to when you're trying new things, is you've got to try 9 different things before you get to that one thing that you're like, "Oh, okay, yeah, this works."
Yeah, absolutely, and that's part of momentum. I mean, I think another part of being stuck is oftentimes it's not, you don't have the motivation. You've gotten yourself such into a rut, you don't know how to get out of it, so you're just not going to do anything. And so, just doing something, it might not be the right thing, but just doing something to get things in motion, to get you out of that stuck place, um, will help. It'll start to build that momentum, so that you'll, yeah, if it's not the right thing, you'll try something else, and you'll try something else, and you'll try something else. But it's oftentimes just starting, do something, just get yourself moving. um but the tricky thing about motivation is usually, well, there's two types. There's the one that's usually the hardest. It's much easier to sit on the couch and eat potato chips and binge watch TV, than go and run 10 miles. So we have to force ourselves sometimes. We actually have to, we have to use our will, and we have to force ourselves, and then it becomes easier, right? You go and take that run, or do the elliptical or whatever it is, and the next time it's a little easier to do it, until eventually you're into a pattern of doing it. So you just got to get up and get moving. And some of the ways to do that, I think, is, your first action should probably be something you can do in less than 2 minutes. So, for instance, if I say I want to start doing yoga lessons, my first step might be, I need to buy a yoga mat. That's going to take me 2 minutes to do that. Simple first step. Um, One recently from my life was, I know I needed to floss more, and I'd bought the all-in-one floss and toothbrush, and it sat in a box. And so the first step that I did, I threw my toothbrush away. So that night when I went to go brush my teeth, I had to take the darn thing out of the box. So one of those simple, like 2 minute things that you could do just to get yourself going, and then reward yourself. I think we don't reward ourselves enough for the progress. We're so looking towards that end goal that we don't appreciate the journey, and we don't reward ourselves for the steps that we've taken when we are successful, because we oftentimes get so single-minded that that's the end points where I'm going. The journey, is just as important, if not more important, because you learn those lessons along the way that help to build to where you're headed. And oftentimes, there's more than enough successful people that talk about, well, once I finally got to that goal, all I did was look towards what's the next goal. So can we really learn to enjoy the journey as we go, and be less focused on that end goal?
For me, certainly what got me, you know, from being stuck was just the sheer will of putting one foot in front of the other the next day. Just baby steps, and that's exactly what I did. Is that, through our conversation today, I've realized that what you've said is somehow intuitively what I knew to do to pull myself up, because, you know in that moment of darkness, I realized that I could either, stay where I was and essentially drown, or look up and start looking at the possibilities. And that's when I started looking forward to, well, if this isn't what I want, what's that future vision? And just writing down, I wrote down 5 simple statements of who that person was. And then the next day I got up and I wrote them out again. And eventually, over a few months, I took those statements and I created them into, more like an affirmation that tied to my why. So
Mhm.
there's some more powerful statements. And I have been getting up, and it's part of my sort of journaling practice now. And every day for 5 years now, I've been getting up and doing that. And I can look back and see how far I've come. And it's simply by just doing those small things at the beginning, and just taking those baby steps, and just one foot in front of the other, and having that hope and the faith that, change will come.
Absolutely. Mantras are unbelievably powerful. Um, Vision boards can be as well, but uh, I think the misconception with vision boards is people will put things like that $1 million house on there, and a private jet, and the things that are so aspirational that it's gonna take, years and years to get there if we're ever going to get there. So, I think they need to be more obtainable, so that you can see that it's possible to get to that thing. And then we need to put those things around us. And so, you writing that mantra or those 5 statements down every day, so powerful. Gratitude is another thing. Gratitude has absolutely shifted my life. And I know for a lot of people, it seems like this woo-woo thing that came out of nowhere, but there's more than enough scientific evidence and research that's been done to prove that how dramatically it can shift things in your life, where it can be as powerful as an antidepressant. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't take antidepressants if that's what you need, but gratitude is very powerful. It's something I practice daily, and it's something that I do with my children, because I want them to have that practice in their life. Because I think if you start to see all of the good that surrounds you, it can have such a positive effect on your mindset, which helps in getting yourself out of the rut. It helps in lifting you up and getting you out of bed to take that next step. So yeah, those are really helpful things.
Yeah, gratitude has also been key, because you're always going to find what you go looking for. So if you go looking for things to support why things are shit, well, that's what you're going to find. But if you go looking for the things that say, no, okay, this is my current situation, but look at what else I have, you can always find something. And, again, that's also been key in creating that shift and that change. And, whether or not you manifest these great things that some people have been able to do with gratitude, I think that's beside the point, because if it makes you feel better, then isn't that what matters most?
Absolutely. And I think once you start to do that, it opens you up in new ways. And so, it's similar to when you start to make, when you need to buy a car, and you've decided on the make and model, and then all of a sudden, all around you, you've seen that car everywhere, and you're like, is it now more sought after vehicle than I've ever noticed before? And it's not, or the new word that or a word you just read in a book, that all of a sudden now you're hearing it everywhere. It's that you've opened yourself up, but those things were always there. But when we start to focus on the positive, when we start to take actions, is when our brains will notice things, and it'll seem like you're manifesting, and things are coming to you, but you're probably just more receptive to them than you ever were before, and more open to the possibilities, so that you're spotting things, and then things build, and again you get that momentum.
Now, Lauren, as we wrap up today, did you have any final words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I think I think the number one thing is being kind to yourself, showing yourself compassion, being patient. You know, you're not always going to get it right the first time. You might have setbacks. You're going to have those days when you don't want to do something. So be compassionate with yourself, but follow through, because I think one of the strongest things can be if you can build trust with yourself. If you say you're going to do something, try and do it, because you're building trust with yourself. You know that you're going to follow through. So I think it comes down to always starting with us, with yourself, and being compassionate and celebratory. When make sure you celebrate yourself, and the progress that you're making, even if it seems like it's microscopic. Every step that you take is a step away from being stuck.
We are definitely our own best friend, and I think that's how we have to treat ourselves, is we have to have that love for ourselves. So I love what you shared there. Now, to connect with Lauren, make sure you check out the show notes. I'm going to have all of the links in there. And remember, if you're feeling lost, stuck, and confused in midlife, grab a copy of my guided journal, Your Journaling Journey. It's packed with tools to help you find clarity, guided prompts, affirmations, and gratitude. You can get Your Journaling Journey on Amazon. I'd like to thank you, all of our listeners, for joining us. And Lauren, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creator.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride, 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 ride. Roller coaster. Ride, ride. Roller coaster.